didn't realize it was going to come up that quick, though. Sorry.
That necessarily didn't mean you had to start talking or the lights come on, but I like that compliance. Thank you.
Let there be light.
Alan, I certainly defer to you, and I can't see you, but you tell me. I know we're waiting for a moment.
We're good.
I heard we're good. Can't see everybody, but howdy, welcome. I heard one howdy. Sound like Bruce Klein. Bruce, is that you? I figured it was the voice. Thank you for sitting in here with us for a little while. This is an opportunity for an informal conversation. And for everyone except Bruce Klein, we welcome the opportunity for you to give feedback. If you got a question or something you want to throw in there, just come on up close. And if we can get where we can see you, we'll just allow you to jump in with us and everything. No real set agenda, but I do have a few topics we're going to talk about and a way that I'm going to kick this off because I threatened Ron with this morning. So I've got a roundabout way I'm going to get to a story. And this is a good one. This is great. David Bullard, past president, Georgia Firefighters Association. David, you probably saw this morning now. Congratulations. Everybody up here is a member of our association now, some in different capacities, past president and honorary lifetime, which is a category you and I don't get. So, I mean, congratulations. You two are in a stature above us. So, David, you've been around a while and everything now on shift. Did you ever work a day off job, something off a shift that you did?
I've worked as a hazmat contractor, and I still teach a good bit on my days off, and that's really the most of what I've done.
Okay. Now, like for instance, when I was on shift, I worked back door to a local drinking establishment, and I cut grass and everything. Ron knows where I'm going with this. Jonathan, did you do anything on your days off?
I played music.
You still do. So that works. So he was a music player. Well, and I bet if I polled everybody in this room, you probably had a job on your days off. Well, 2 weeks ago?
Yep.
2 weeks ago, I'm sitting in an audience of 4,000 people. And Chief Estep tells this story I'd never heard before. And it was a good one.
People haven't told that story in a while.
Okay. Well, I hadn't heard this story ever. So, I mean, I've known you now 20 years plus or whatever. And I just had never heard this story about a job that this gentleman, Ron Sarnicki, if you don't know who I'm talking to here on my left, executive director of the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. Ron, when he worked shift with PG County, had one heck of a gig. Creative. Now, firefighters are creative, right? You're going to find a way to make a buck off something. And there's a way, there's a scam, there's an angle, there's always something. Ron had a classic money gig on his days off. And I don't know how to lead it. I mean, because they're not going to believe me. So they're just going to watch your reaction.
Yep.
He had a gorilla suit. And he would go to birthday parties
Whatever.
dressed as a gorilla. True or false?
True story.
And
It was called Gorillagram. And the rest of the story is my wife's dad was in the costume business, Halloween, stuff like that. And we were trying to figure out, like every firefighter that is working a lot and getting underpaid, how to make ends meet. And so he said, look, I can arrange some costumes and you can go out and do parties and anniversaries and birthdays and all that. So the rest of the story, here we go. The original costume was a full gorilla suit, head to toe. And we had a banana backpack made out of cloth, and we would bring real bananas and balloons, candy, all that. But we also had a chicken suit. And if you could imagine a 6-foot chicken showing up at your birthday party, it was entertaining. And then my wife would dress up as Raggedy Ann or one of the other girl-related costumes, and we would do events around the community.
brilliant. Carter Jones, you thought you were cheap, man. You just didn't know. This cat over here is making money all kind of which ways. You got ideas now. Good for you. Congratulations.
It paid the bills.
That's what it took. And it's sad because you said it. And half people in this room. You do it. Why? Okay. You got time off shift and you need a source of income.
Got to make sure there's food on the table.
And not to get a downer right off the bat, but how sad is that, and what a sad reality we've got is that's no different than today. Smart gig, how long ago that's been?
Oh, geez. 35 years.
Right, but still, and I can't see hands and everything, but my bet is the number of people sitting out there that's working some shift routines probably got a second gig. True or false? Yeah, what a sad reality it is. Sad reality.
But we do it because we love it. That's why we're in this industry. Because if it was for the money, I'm not sure I'd be signing up.
No.
But that's just the nature of our business.
We spent the earlier part of this year, and same's true around the country. You see it the other side of the river. We experience it in state, and we were talking about it at lunch with our friends from North Carolina. We're just experiencing something that we haven't experienced in years with our labor pool resource and the problems we've got, people leaving, number of people retiring soon. We were talking about they're leaving agencies and things that we know and that we love for a long time. We're in the midst of something that I don't think we've seen before. The number of people, COVID, the great retirement, the great resignation, whatever it is, but it's just an interesting factoid that even is affecting the building in which we are sitting, because we were talking at lunchtime about some of the manpower limitations even this place has got. It's just the workforce has shifted and changed. Same thing across the river in Georgia, I'm sure.
It is. Well, I think that society has changed and we're learning to adapt to that. And I was listening to something the other day and they said, if you hire somebody today, and I'm not going to use the word millennial or Gen Y or whatever, really anybody you hire, if within 3 to 5 years they don't feel like they're engaged in making a difference, they're gone. And I don't care if you're a private corporation, you're the fire service, your EMS, whatever, if they feel their voice isn't being heard or they're not contributing in a way that their ideas are getting listened to, they're going to bounce. And that's true on the volunteer side or career side. So we have to adapt ourselves, and maybe we can try to transition that a little bit. But Ron, I want to know, in retirement, are you bringing the gorilla suit back out?
Yeah. No, but I'll loan it to you.
I have worn one before. I'll wear it again.
Absolutely.
Recently I saw a picture, David, of you. You had to testify. I think you did a congressional hearing on behalf of NVFC and your role with them. Tell us a little bit about that hearing.
So we testified for the reauthorization of SAFER and FIRE Act, and an ask that the Senate pass language to keep a CPI adjustment in those grants. We asked the Senate to do the same thing, but the conversations that evolved during that kind of impressed me. We were before the Science and Technology Committee, and we talked about it, especially on the volunteer side, with job opportunities leaving small towns. You lose people that are going to work in town. They either move away to chase their jobs, or they're working out of town, and they have employers that can't let them go because their workforce is so slim, they can't. Letting you go to a fire call could bankrupt them. And there was conversation about tying that back to apprenticeship programs and rural workforce development programs out of Congress, which was pretty neat. They were looking at it from that side. But the comment was made by Representative Collins, who was over the committee, that it's not Congress's job to fund the fire service. And he said that 3 or 4 times, but they seemed supportive. And I think that in the last 20 or so years, a lot of folks have become dependent upon federal grants. And I'm not saying that they're not staying their doors open, staying afloat because of them, but it made it easy to get things, and that money's getting slimmer. Costs are going up, and the conversations back to your boards, your city councils, or county commissions meant to change unless we can keep the word out to keep those grants coming and well-funded.
And that being one of the big things which we spent time talking about on DC trip, to try to reinforce the necessity of that funding for those sources and things.
Part of it is that there's this effort underway called One Voice. And for years, the fire service has been down at the Hill lobbying for what we need. But unfortunately, from time to time, some of the organizations or some of the other individuals who are speaking to our members of Congress might have a slightly different view of how funding should be provided. And so Dr. Lori Mormero, the current fire administrator, has started a campaign called One Voice, so that if we can get in agreement on the things that we critically need, and then all of they call them the Seven Sisters, all the major fire service organizations, were down there talking about the issues the same and not necessarily special interests separate from everybody else, then we will get much more. And one of those initiatives is parity within government with law enforcement. Not to say we need to take anything away from law enforcement. We're not saying that. But if you have a law enforcement issue or a funding issue, you go to the Department of Justice. If you have an issue with funding for fire and EMS, you might have to go to Homeland Security or FEMA or Health and Human Services or Transportation. And so the fire service funding coming at the federal level is divided among numerous agencies, including Department of Interior for wildland, Bureau of Land Management. There's no one entity that is controlling the purse strings for fire. So that's part of the initiative. I know that's been the discussion with all the national organizations, is that, you know, there is funding to be had, but we've got to be speaking with one voice, because it's so easy for Congress to say, well, the National Volunteer Fire Council thinks this, the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation thinks that, the IFC is here, IFF is there, NFPA is there. Till you all decide what you're going to do unilaterally, we're not going to worry about it. And we get left at the trough, and it's empty.
I've had the opportunity to be in 2 forums in which she spoke, and I've been thoroughly impressed with her leadership, her fired up, man, she's ready to go. She's ready to just kick tail and take names. And that has just been so impressive. And that's nothing detrimental to her predecessors, but I've just been really impressed at her ability, whether it's the one voice issues or just her initiatives, Jonathan, that I know she has impact on things that y'all are doing with the fire marshal's office with a lot of the reporting issues and everything too. And I know you've been in those same forums with her, but I just have been thoroughly impressed at how fired up and how she's really trying to pull these people together.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could translate that down to what we've seen historically at the state level. When we approach a legislative issue as the South Carolina Fire Service and not individual organizations, we've seen success. The most recent being the Firefighter Cancer Healthcare Benefit Plan. You know, there for years, all the different organizations that wanted something had their own way of getting it, and when all of them came together and agreed on one way to submit it into legislation, that was the time it was successful. And then maybe timing just played into it, but in the end, going with one voice and not being you know, a segmented occupation lends itself to a stronger voice, where you're not, one group's not distracting from the message of another. You all carrying the same message. There's a lot of strength in that at the federal level, at the state level. I mean, even at the local level. I mean, we've seen that, you know, whether it be at the county, the municipal, the special purpose district commission meetings, when the fire service speaks as one voice, I mean, they're representative of the community. And so they certainly add strength to, I don't want to say the argument, but strength to the message.
And I know that, Ron, probably you've seen it better than I have, but I was amazed at a couple of those times that I was sitting there, how people aren't of that frame of mind. There's a lot of territorialism and people that just really don't want to get on board with that concept. And we're pretty negative about her approach to do that. And that just, it shocked me, because I mean, I guess I had perceived and seen for so long the need and the necessity at a federal level, but also at some of the issues of which she is trying to address. Common sense, just the necessity of having people talk, and it hadn't been 100%. And fire marshals, you and I had those conversations about some of the fire marshals that were resistant to some of the changes just because of the territorial nature of some of the stuff they're doing. But gosh, we've got to do this. We've got to do this. The ability of sitting people there in that auditorium around that table and having those discussions at National Fire Academy is just overwhelmingly powerful.
It has made a difference. And you're right. Unfortunately, in years past, everybody had their sandbox and really didn't want to invite everybody else in. And I think that there's been a movement through several of the past administrators to get there. But some of the politics and some of the organizational structures had to change with time. But for the foundation, since our headquarters is at the National Fire Academy, we're interacting with the fire administration almost daily. And I can tell you that Lori's, she's a friend, so I guess I could get away with calling her that, Dr. Mara Moore. But Lori says, look, I've got a short window, 3 years I'll be here. Don't know what'll happen with the election. Not making any political statements. We'll leave that alone. But she says, I'm going to get as much done as I can. And she's been a fireball. And what she did was she got all the heads of all the national organizations to say, look, we've got a window. You got Deanne Criswell, who is the FEMA administrator, who was a wildland firefighter, who comes up through the ranks, understands it. She's got the Secretary of Homeland Security's ear. Now's our chance. And if we as a fire industry don't get organized, we're going to blow this opportunity. It's in front of us right now.
What's the chances? Politics is not something we can really predict. What's the chances that she could be reappointed in another leadership role by another regime? Another president takes over again. I'm not interested in politics. But
Normally,
chances?
the fire administrator is appointed by the new president, and it usually falls within political parties. However, there's already a movement afoot that no matter who wins the election, that if the 7 major fire service organizations representing 1.4 million firefighters all say, look, you can make all the appointments in Washington you want. We want one. And we want her. That would be the only way, but it's possible.
That's awesome, because I'm telling you, she's that strong. I've heard that much good stuff. And one of the things I kick back over to you again that impacts us street level is I'm going to even far as say as they're trashing NIFRs and starting completely over. I mean, that's really kind of the way she painted a picture to us, is they're just what your reporting system that you're having to do with all those blanks that we send to him that say undetermined, unknown. They're doing away with all that stuff and creating a new system. And she's been pretty adamant with a firm deadline to where that has to be done.
Yeah, and the some of the things that the way it will affect other states, it won't have the same impact on us because primarily you submit to INFRS directly, it doesn't come to us and then we submit on your behalf. Other states, it currently goes through the state fire marshal's office, and so there's some challenges with how they change that at the state level. We really don't have that issue in South Carolina because of the way we do it. Nobody knows exactly. I think they're just developing the request for proposals for, I think they've announced UL is going to be involved in that. But in terms of the dynamics of what the data looks like, the one thing that's impressed me, and I'm not technology savvy enough to understand how all it works, but leveraging machine learning and all those AI scares me because I don't understand it, but apparently it's the thing. It's here, right? I was watching on the news this morning about now you can have use AI to mimic a loved one's voice, and they were scamming people for ransom because I don't understand so some of that stuff scares me. But utilizing machine learning to where, in our office, we're doing tons of data mining on your incident data to make, interpolations, extrapolations, whatever you want to call it, to look at and develop statewide and local statistics through Fire Safe South Carolina. We can drill down to your local jurisdiction's risk assessment based on different factors. But the way I understand it, using machine learning, it kind of automates a lot of that stuff. Is the system begins to learn the trends, the system begins to learn not just trends in terms of common causes of fatal fires and that sort of stuff, but just it begins to learn our habits. Again, tying rather than what we know as INFRS being a standalone data set, it's tying it directly to the things that we at the fire marshal's office at the state level here in South Carolina, we layer multiple data sets to give you those risk assessments. So we look at your incident data, we look at census data, we look at human behavioral factors from different sources and all this kind of stuff. And what she's talking about is tying those things together because they're already connected through the Internet of Things, I think is the way they put it, so that the system basically can spit that stuff out without us having to take data sets from different things, layer them, interpret them, and all that kind of stuff. Computers are smart enough to do that interpretation for you now, and so that's moving infers into what technology is today. I think is the part that excites me the most, and that it's going to help us to work smarter and not harder. We have to put in a lot of man hours to layer that data manually now in a way that it appears that this new system will do it for us.
Well, Ron, you may be able to elaborate, but basically what I heard her say was that the system, the technology that they're currently using for national NIFRs, all the stuff we send to them, is so archaic that they can't get data information. And what they do get, it's 2 years old or something by the time it gets released, and that functionality doesn't exist because the system is designed, or how many years old, the way the program software maintenance is kept. It's just basically non-functional. I don't know if that's what.
It's a pretty accurate statement. And the problem is that each data entry point is exactly that. So say, for example, you have a call, the 911 dispatcher is putting in all the basic information. But if it's not tied to the CAD, then that station people are putting all that stuff in again and straight on down the line. And so the idea is that there are data sets, as you said, that are already out there that would pre-fill a lot of the spacing. So you only have to add the component that you were involved with. But what it'll also do is take those human elements, risk factors, and then human analysis. And then when you want to know what's the trend in my community, where is most likely the next series of calls going to be, or what is the future need for fire or EMS or paramedics or whatever, it's going to help you digest that.
And I think the challenge is going to be the same challenge we have today, and it's the part that we don't really have control over other than those things we can automate. But even those things we can automate, a human has to enter it somehow, some way. So data quality, I think, is always going to be the challenge regardless of the system we use. And some of that has to do with training, the end user on what's the correct way to enter this. So that I did a lot of database stuff when I was in college. All of that stuff is just completely obsolete. Everything I learned is completely obsolete. But the concepts are that you start with what do you want to know, and then you build a system to collect the data that tells you that. And I think infers over the years, in its archaic fashion, like you said, has expanded to ask so many questions that we're not really interested in everything it could tell us anymore. And so we don't see the return. One of the things that I appreciate about what our community risk reduction staff does and what FireSafe South Carolina does is we return your data to you in a usable format, actionable intelligence. And I think the success of whatever the program is the end user that's inputting the data on the front end has to get something back that lets them understand how the data is being used. It's actionable intelligence in return, and that incentivizes
Right.
quality data being put in.
Absolutely.
Well, in addition, there's also a plan that is going to tie into your scoring for Fire Act and Safer. So now where you're dependent upon, you may want a brush truck, but you're listed as an urban department, but the data is going to show you're running urban interface fires. That may improve your scoring for that. So right now that is not there, would clean that up some as well.
It was interesting that I heard, and boy, we're really going down this rabbit hole with this, but this is good conversation because it made me think about these people sitting out here, is because she was even painting the vision. And to your point, I think Steve Kerber and that crowd have gotten the bid to do this project or whatever, but her vision that she was painting was the fact that even somebody riding an apparatus could have cell phone access to be able to do report completing and filing. Again, state by state, it may be different, but we're talking about potentially somebody riding your rigs with incident reporting capability right in their hand. And gosh, that's just going to be incredibly important. Accuracy, information going in, and the necessity of simplicity of options that the person can be putting in there, so it just doesn't become, and I'll harp on it because I've seen it just a million times, the undetermineds and the unknowns and all that crap that just goes into it. So that's kind of scary, but that technological jump to where, hey, I can just, there's my fire report. I got it in my hand.
I think that's part of the plan. The other piece is, as we talk about firefighter safety and survivability, is the true incidents information that's out there that's happening, and structural issues, uh, air quality, all these other elements that we know contribute to a firefighter's illness or injury, is going to be able to be diagnosed and quantified and really provide research-based evidence that will help us in our training and our education and improve the survivability of the fire service.
And that was part, now we were going to get around to this, but that's a great bridge because that's part of 16 life safety initiatives, right? I mean, so we're kind of getting around to that data component of that to be able to say that it's not just incident reporting in those categories, but back to what we do, best practices for our own safety, for our own health.
It's exactly right. And, oftentimes you talk about Fire Act and the justification for some of those grants are developed by departments. But if you really dig deep, departments kind of know on what their best guess is. But if someone actually said, prove it,
Yeah.
it may make it difficult. And so this new system is going to help us have the evidence-based research. That's why it's being applied through UL and their research center to give us the tools, to get the resources, to make it safer and more survivable.
I think about your organization does such a great job of taking care of folks that are dying in line of duty and their families, their beneficiaries. But at some point, we're now saying, and a lot of people standing up, we heard it the other week, cancer being the leading cause of firefighter fatality. At what point is somebody going to, this is a wave right now, but at some point is somebody going to say, prove it. Show me why, how, when, Jonathan, this thing happened to him. Is this going to play into that and be part of it?
Well, I think it will. And if you think about cancer in the fire service, we've known that cancer has been an issue for many years. Firefighters have died from cancer for a long time, friends of mine a long time ago. But it wasn't until 9/11 that the connection was made to be able to say it is a direct and proximal result for line of duty deaths. And that was the work that Dr. Howard did with all the carcinogens at World Trade Center. And that's changed now because until last year, cancer was not considered a line of duty death category through the Public Safety Officer Benefit Program. And not every state even has a presumptive bill yet. And so that evidence-based research has now shown that there is a link between cancer and our industry. And now we're seeing cases being approved at the state level and at the federal level. We're adding names every year in Emmitsburg. But there's a lot of cases that fell into that gray area because it was a result of continual exposures over a long period of time that the firefighter eventually got the cancer from.
And it's my understanding that in the new incident reporting system that there's an element that will kind of act as the exposure tracker for the firefighter. You were on the scene, you were doing this activity, this was burning, therefore this was being off-gassed or produced, therefore you were exposed. And so it's my understanding that that's part of, I don't know to what level it does that, but exposure tracking is one of the goals of the new system.
It's becoming a national evidence collection point that takes the information on all the departments across the country. A house fire in Boise really probably isn't any different than a house fire in Bowie, Maryland. But yet, 2 different states, 2 different rules, 2 different regulations, and 2 different presumptives. But the byproducts of combustion in those 2 houses are identical. But yet, some get the benefits and some don't. So that's part of this, is that collection piece.
If you were in the room early this morning, you probably saw a little commercial we had up on the screen, but we had the CDC NOSH firefighter registry site up and everything. And so that's kind of the bigger part of this bigger movement, is it not? And then if one of you want to elaborate, or I can kind of tell, but the commercial point, but you want to elaborate on that efforts or kick it to whomever?
Well, so we worked for several years to get it passed, to create the registry, and they got the funding for it. It kicked off a month or so ago to officially open up the register. we're not registering for our generation. We're registering for the next generation right now to get data, but it's designed to be a tracking tool to look at your overall health over the next 20 years, the rest of your career. And it's not invasive. They're not going to ask for your social security number. They're not going to ask for your fingerprint, anything like that, but it's just to collect data on you as time goes on. And as you said, one day somebody calls the bluff, right? And I'm not going to quote a cancer rate here. Let's just say something that's 1.5 times more likely for a firefighter to get cancer X. If we don't have good data to show that correlation, somebody finally says, prove it, because that's 150% of those cases. Well, I'm screwing my math up here, but a lot of those cases will get it based on genetics or whatever. We have to have some kind of a tie-in. So if you're in the fire service, depending how long you've been in, they say it takes a little longer on registry. 15 to, Joe probably took an hour and a half.
It was weird. Now, I want to tell you, so the specifics, Google it if you need to, because I'm not going to be able to get the exact address. It was up on that commercial. Sorry, we'll play it again. CDC, NOSH, you can Google firefighter registry, and basically they're looking at your work history. I did it. I registered. And the only thing that took me any length of time was the fact it wants you all of the departments you worked at. And so, yeah, okay, I get kicked out of a lot of departments. So I work a lot of different places. So that took me a little bit
You
longer.
bounce back a couple times.
I have come back and come back. And so
Does it ask about outside jobs, gorilla?
gorilla suits. It did, I think it was a category. But do that. Find it, Google it, register yourselves. It really doesn't, David, take a lot of time, especially if your work history, if you've been with one department, because it asks things like, what were your job responsibilities and duties? What were your years of service? So do it. It's a methodology by which we can play something that's a larger role in the national registers.
Hey, pick a rainy day that you have a little bit of time. You do it one time, you're not going to do it again. So it isn't like you're doing 45 minutes or an hour every 6 months or every month, something like that. So just for the good of the fire service, for them, right? For those that come behind us, for those that are cohorts, and for each other, do it.
Because the challenge is when we go to our policymakers, and I use that term because it transcends levels of government, right? Is when we go to our policymakers, we oftentimes are coming to them with anecdotal information. It's our stories. It's what we know. It's what we've experienced, and we're not able to give them the empirical, the numbers, the real data that they're asking for. You know, this has been our experience. And so having some way to collect it may take a career to collect that kind of data. But at some point we've got to get there, and which means we have to start somewhere at some point.
Shift gears a little bit. You've been in this for almost 50 years. You're past 23. Is that how long has been with this organization? I stand back and watch it in awe and in admiration. I've got my quantifiable things that I think that NFFF has done. It's just fantastic for us, for me, for the fire service. But in your view, what's some of the milestone big things that you're most proud of to be a part of, or that has been accomplished, do you feel?
I think there's two areas. We've really enhanced the long-term family support when a firefighter dies in the line of duty. When I first came to the foundation, we did the memorial service. We had some scholarships, but that was about it. And I hate to say it, but back then, we would invite the families to come to Emmitsburg for the National Memorial and say, oh, by the way, you got to pay your own way to get there. Nobody was covering your travel. And so we've said that just isn't right. If we're going to be a grateful nation, we need to be a grateful nation. And so the family programs has enhanced dramatically, and that starts with the last teams. You know, South Carolina Firefighter Association was one of the first states to step up to the plate and say, we want to get a statewide team. We learned a lot from them. They learned a lot from us. But now, you know, we're servicing 6,000 families across the country, going way back to, you know, whenever their line of duty occurred, and we'll be there for as long as they need it. We put the systems in place to do that, and that wasn't happening before. And then I think on the other side of the coin is the prevention efforts, whether it's the 16 life safety initiatives, everyone goes home, the work in behavioral health, which back to South Carolina, the Medical University of South Carolina Debbie Blaylock at the Dorchester, Charleston Mental Health, I think, was a part of the creation of Stress First Aid and Curbside Manor. That started right here in your state. And now that's the national standard among the fire industry across the country. And so those programs are the other piece that I'm proud of, is that, I can't say how many, but I know that if you look at the traditional criteria that was in place when I started to when it changed by adding 9/11 cancer, adding COVID deaths, and of course, World Trade Center, the number of traditional deaths decreased by 25%. But now the criteria is different because we've added more categories. That's just much more work we have to do. But I think that the other piece that we're now adding that's going to change the criteria again, which is the next horizon, is firefighter suicides. The legislation has been passed. If the scenario fits a certain criteria, then a firefighter's death as a result of self-infliction will become a line of duty. And there's certain categories and parameters that have to be met. But I can tell you right now, there's 60 firefighter suicide cases at the Department of Justice being evaluated for line of duty death determinations. And you think about that's a lot of our brothers and sisters that are gone. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that going on. And that's why we need to peer support the behavioral health and the interventions.
I hope you never have to be involved in this, but if you have had the opportunity to experience the way that organization treats families and takes care of families, it's almost phenomenal. The team of people that you've got work there that do not only David volunteering and helping with that weekend program, but I'm just talking about families in general, and the coordination and the management and the assistance that you give to them is just almost unbelievable. I mean, it really just to see it.
The team is made up of fire service representatives from across the country. That's what makes it work. Everybody's there for the right reason, doing the right things.
And it shows even on that weekend, because everything about that weekend is about them.
Exactly.
We attend, but we're in the back. We attend, but we're just there for sea of blue. Everything that's done is about that group, those people that are there, and it's impressive to see.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
If you want to know the meaning of the word love, you just go to Emmitsburg now the first weekend in May, and that is agape at its purest.
You help with that. You volunteered with that.
I've been a escort now for 12 or 13 years, and a phenomenal experience.
And again, I hope nobody in this room has to enjoy or see firsthand those benefits. Many of them have, though. I saw faces as they walked in.
But we welcome all of you to be a part of it. So if you want to, just reach out to us, and got plenty of opportunities, whether it's honor guard, escorts, pipes and drums, behind the scenes logistics. There's always room for more.
It's awesome stuff. Now, you mentioned some of the other programs as well, and not to belittle them, I got kind of off on just the weekend and the family functions and things, but everyone goes home, the life initiatives. I know you've been key in a lot of the Tampa 2 programs, both of those. Those had to be some proud moments. Those had to be something that just, not necessarily just about you, but just to be a part of that and be part of organizing that had to be something.
It has been a phenomenal journey, and I think that what it's done, it's actually, for whatever reason, the planets aligned through Tampa 1, Tampa 2, and then the connection to President Truman and the fire prevention report of 1947. That has led to where Lori is, Dr. Moore Merrill is, with One Voice. She hosted the first National Fire Service Summit to deal with community risk reduction, prevention, firefighter injuries and deaths. And that was held in Emmitsburg. The president and the Homeland Security Secretary both piped in electronically, were a part of that. That led to across the nation, a whistle stop tour, both East Coast and West Coast, trying to bring everybody to the table. And then I can tell you that the second summit is being planned for May next year, probably in the DC area, followed by an international life safety summit that the Fire Administration is going to host in October, bringing all of the nations that have organized fire service entities together for the first time ever in our history. So it's pretty cool stuff.
You're closer than anybody in this room, quite arguably. Break out the crystal ball. What's coming? What's next? What's the big challenge? What's the big thing that's facing us? What's the big hooray moment that's maybe being developed or coming? What do you see as the future of some of the things that we've yet to face?
I think the data piece is critical. If we don't have good data to justify funding, decision making, I think that's going to be an element. Recruitment and retention continues to haunt us. It's hard to find bodies, people that want to do this. And when we do get them in, how do we maintain and keep them there? I was talking to a couple people earlier today. We were talking about the high school cadet programs. In Maryland, we have one, and it functions fairly well for 16-year-olds to get engaged. They can't be involved in interior operations until they're 18, but they're doing it while they're in high school. So that long time it takes to get all that training, they're doing it half days every afternoon at 4 of our fire training academies across the state. But I can tell you, in my volunteer firehouse, where I'm still active, we bring somebody in who's a young adult, and you tell them, look, you need to get firefighter 1, EMT, hazmat, right to know, all the bloodborne, all those other things, and you're looking at 300-400 hours of training. Halfway through, they're like, I haven't even ridden the first rig, and I thought I really wanted to do this, but it's just too much, and so we lose people in that process.
I'll give a shout out because now I saw early and I can't see for the lights. Brian Reeby, you still in here? And there, I hear the voice. I'm pointing in the general direction. The gentleman that just said yes, sir. Brian, can you say loud enough? Tell us what you do.
I am an educator teaching high school students firefighting at a career center in Greenville County.
I'll see a lot of posts and pictures of what you do, so I'm going to equate that into success. So thank you, sir, for what you're doing. But I assume it's going well.
Yes, looking at 16 in the fall.
And we hit statewide, I think we have those career technology center high school programs in 23, basically half of the state, 23 out of 46 counties. I think it's the latest numbers. We're constantly trying to grow that number and help support. Obviously, it requires support of the local fire department. You can't pull off that class, and most of the career centers are not going to buy their own fire apparatus and SCBAs. A lot of that gets donated, but certainly I would encourage you, if you don't have a CTC program in your county and you're interested in one, reach out to us. I see at least the shadow of Benita Waters sitting next to Brian. It's hard to make everything out, but that kind of falls. Benita's been instrumental in growing that program through the Fire Academy. But they're going to finish high school with firefighter 1, if SAC Pro Board firefighter 1, and possibly firefighter 2.
I was going to say this. Now, I'm not as familiar with the other side of the river, so tell us
We're
about
about
that
the
side.
same number of programs in Georgia and across the country. It's really catching on. But I issue 2 challenges on it. One is we need to train the folks in our departments how to integrate those folks in. That we don't treat them like day one snot. They're coming in with some education, no experience, but education, right? So a way to transition them in without making them feel like an outcast. And secondly, to encourage in the smaller communities, that's still an option. If this isn't a career for you, it's still something you can do to provide back to your community. Or if you do this and you go from volunteer to career, don't forget that your community still needs you and still volunteer there as well. So I think that's a 2-piece thing we could do with that, but they're phenomenal programs. We do it for law enforcement. We do it for electricians and automotive. So why not?
But they do have those programs over there.
They do. I think pretty much every state
Yeah.
has some semblance of them now.
So one of the discussions that is going on is a national accepted apprenticeship program, like sheet metal workers and welders and plumbers have, and have it come through the Department of Labor for the fire service. How that'll look in each community, we're not sure yet, but that's a discussion that's out there. But the 2 dilemmas we faced in Maryland in getting students into that program, our cadet program, was one, most of the guidance counselors had no idea what firefighting was about. And that's oftentimes the people who are making recommendations for those students. You know, for years it was, you got to go to college. You got to go to college. Well, college isn't for everybody. And if you could get them into that program, the career fire service is phenomenal. You don't necessarily need a college degree to go there. And how we got the guidance counselors to understand it is we went in with the salary scales of a starting firefighter in the Baltimore, Washington region, and they were making more than the guidance counselors were as a starting firefighter. That twisted that a little bit. The second piece that we found was a problem, at least in our area, like the Eastern Shore Training Academy services 5 counties. So you're dealing with 5 school districts, and there was a big issue in getting the students to the training academy for half a day. It was hard to bus 2 or 3 kids from each county. So we applied for a SAFER grant. So here's a little tidbit. If you do SAFER, you can reimburse for mileage for those high school kids to go to the cadet program. So now what they do is they're driving themselves from high school to the training academy at lunchtime. They get that mileage reimbursed, and the price of gas today, that's a pretty nice incentive. And it's worked out for us.
And I don't want to speak for Brian. Brian's probably one of the most successful programs in the state. Not a toot your
Probably the
horn,
country.
but I think one of the challenges that we commonly hear from those program instructors is the challenge of recruiting the right students into the program. Is when I was a training officer, I taught a high school program, and one of the challenges was I got students that thought it was an easy A, and then they met the accredited exam. You know,
Or they see that structural building with the
right?
fire and the hose line.
What do you mean we're going to do PT? What do you mean I have to sweat and get dirty? You know, and so I think one of the challenges, and it mirrors the challenge I think we have in the fire service in general, is recruiting the right people into the job, people that understand what we're about. We were talking today at lunch. You weren't at my table. You were about successful football coaches start by building a culture that great players want to belong to, and I think that's a big part of the successful programs have created a culture of its own that is attractive to the kind of folks you want into the program. And I know that's one of the I know where you're going.
Saw my wheels
Is
turning.
that was one of the life safety initiatives I believe was a cultural change.
Exactly.
And you could jump in there because he saw where I was going, so you could jump in anywhere. But yes, and a bigger part of recruitment as well. Just forget about the age bracket. The successful departments are those that people want to be a part of. Maybe not just because they train well, or they look well, or because whatever the case may be. I want to be a part of something, and so it transcends just that age bracket. The successful volunteer and to a degree paid systems. I want to go there. I want to be a part of Columbia County.
And again, you Will Vinay gives me a hard time because I'm from the country and I speak country, but you catch what you fish for, right? So you like that one, don't you, Will? Yeah. So, part of that is building, and this is becoming more and more the conversation, but building within that culture the ideas of diversity and equity and inclusion, and having your department, your classes look like the community in which they're serving. And so building a culture that people want to belong to and attracts folks to the program is a challenge, because it takes a lot of work to build that culture. It's not a mission statement. It's not a slogan. It's not a logo. You're really building something that people want to belong to.
Our keynote speaker this morning, I would argue, is probably part of an elite group, one of the toughest ones to navigate into and maintain and be successful. And yet they've got people wanting to be part of something that's, we saw, if you saw the videos this morning, that's that difficult. They still got people wanting to do it. Why?
They have an ethos. They live by ethos. And they today, he's years removed from, being active in that service, but he still lives by that ethos. It's who he is, and I think that's what we see in the fire service too, is those of us that have embraced that ethos of the fire service of a firefighter, it is who we are.
There are many parallel examples that we can offer throughout society, and you can fill in the blanks with them. You just can't sell your soul and think you're going to reap all kind of rewards. Can't tell you the number of times, and I know y'all have had this too, the arguments with people. It's too tough to be a volunteer. We've got to lower our standards. It's too tough to be a part of this. We've got to change. And my contention is, no, you don't. Because ethos, establish what that is, attract people that want to be a part of something. Don't give up just to try to meet masses. Make masses come to you because it's something that's desirable, not exclusive, not insulting, not something that keeps you out, but it's something people aspire to want to be a part of. And there's the measure of success. The people that have successful organizations that aren't bleeding people are those people that people want to stay there. Maybe that's pay, but more likely
It's inclusion.
there.
It is inclusion. Your inclusion in the mission, your inclusion in believing what that department is trying to accomplish, and the belief that you have a role to play in that. And even if you're not always successful, you're supported and you're given opportunities to grow. That's why people stay. That's that culture. That's that ethos.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about lowering standards. It's kind of one of those things of we see a destination and it's difficult to get there. That doesn't mean we change the destination. It means we have to create or change the mode of transportation, right? The medium that we use to get there. And so, that's where, the Fire Academy, we've created all these different ways to get to Firefighter One. I can't even keep count of how many different modules or however you want to deliver it. But we've got to constantly be creative in how we get you there. That doesn't mean we have to change the destination of where we're going. Maybe sometimes the destination is flawed and we need to look at that. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case here.
I think that supports the analogy this morning of looking over the whole hill with the binoculars versus breaking the small chunks. If you focus on the small chunks, we find the things to work on and tweak. We've still got to survey the whole hill, the whole valley, whatever, but our approach can constantly be reevaluated and we can look for ways to make it adaptive. Do you change how you train? Do you go to a hybrid model? Do you learn that somebody you're bringing on today doesn't like to sit there and have 2-hour lectures? Do you look at micro learning?
What Benita and I have these conversations all the time because we just like to have these kind of intellectual. But one of the things we struggle with, and I think it's not just a fire academy, but the education system in general is challenged by teachers, instructors to teach the way the students learn. And that's an ever evolving thing. And we have not been able to evolve as fast as learning has. I mean, we had the discussion in the training officers meeting about live instructor-led online training. That's something that we got forced into because of COVID, but man, it's successful. It takes the right instructor because it's a different teaching environment. It's a different way to keep students engaged. It's the right instructor with the right students can make that really successful. But my wife's a teacher, so I see this in her classes too. It's the challenge of understanding the learning environment has changed, the way students learn has changed. You got the injection of all kinds of technology that I don't necessarily understand, and the challenge of keeping up with the evolving way that students learn.
As you talk about culture, that's the first initiative, change the culture of the fire service. And I have to tell you that of all of the 16 initiatives, that one was the most controversial. We heard more from the fire service community about that statement than any of the other ones. And, I think that as we reflect back to sitting in, it was in Alan Brunestini's conference room at his headquarters that some of the initiatives were originally developed back in Phoenix years ago. The intent was to do that, to stir the pot, to get people to think about what is the culture of the fire service.
He was good at that.
He was good at that, and there was others in there. John Salka was there, in the creation of the initiatives and a bunch of other people that from across the country. But, the biggest resistance was that people thought that meant we weren't going to be excellent, aggressive firefighters. You know what I mean? That we were saying you can't go in, all those things that we've heard. And I believe me, there's a litany of stories we could tell. The truth of the matter is that it was trying to be an educated, you've heard this, an educated firefighter, understanding the best technique for the application of the situation you're at. And it wasn't just, damn the torpedoes full speed ahead, because sometimes that doesn't work. And I could name you a dozen incidents where that hasn't worked and often ended in tragedy. But the point is that the evidence-based research hadn't caught up to us yet. Steve Kerber's done a phenomenal stuff, and the slogan "Hit it hard from the yard" that created the controversy out there.
Slicers.
Yeah, all that. But the truth of the matter is, and I heard this at the Maryland Fire Rescue Institute almost 40 years ago in recruit school, that you have to bring a toolbox with multiple tools. You have to know which tool to use in the situation you're in. And that's what we were trying to get across with culture. We didn't want to take away duty, honor, courage, valor. All that's all part of our industry. But also understanding the risk, the gain, and most of all, having a solid knowledge base to make good decisions along the way.
And this state is rife with resource limited suppression capabilities. And I'm not just talking about my home county, but if most of these people were honest, you'd say the same thing about where you come from, whether that's big city or small town or out in the country. We suffer from a problem to where our resources are at a dangerously low level. And because we are firefighters, we're making it work. We're making do. We're doing the best we can. And we're setting ourselves up, I think. And I think one of the challenges that we soon to have face is the reality that resource, the personnel resource limitations that we factually have are such that culture is going to have to be forced to change, is that the acceptance of the fact that we've got to do some different things, that we've got to accept science, that we've got to accept research about alternative methods of deployment and the extinguishment. If we don't do that, all we're doing is setting ourselves up for more of your services.
Yeah, it boils down to your tactics have to match the resources you bring to the fight. If Denver were back out here, Navy SEAL, there's not many things that I don't think you could send the SEALs in that Chief Klein and I were talking about. There's not many situations you wouldn't send a team of SEALs in to handle. But what you don't see, and Chief Klein being a Marine, is the support network of what it takes for that group that's the tip of the spear. Thank you, Will. To do what they do. And so we've got to think in the same manner. Is we have to have, if we choose a selected strategy, if we choose a selected tactic, we've got to have the resources to perform that tactic. And it's great we bring instructors from all over the country and all over the world to conferences like this, and everything they teach is valuable, but it's not necessarily always equivalently applicable to where I come from, so you've got to match your tactics to the resources you're bringing to the game. And that just may mean that your play looks a little bit different here than it does there.
It aggravates me because here's a culture thing. It aggravates me that there are many places I go in South Carolina, I'll speak more specifically about, that automatically assume we've got to do like fill in the blank big department. We have to think like fill in the blank whatever big department. We have to adopt tactics like whatever big department. Just because that's what they're doing, we've got to be like them. And I'm saying you can't be like them because you can't throw 60 people on a room and contents like that. It just won't work. But what it can work is you being intelligent and doing enough research and learning enough of the facts and the science to be safe in your application of what resources you've got and as effective as you can be, and that be okay. Because quite frankly, if we are not successful, that either means we're going to hurt us or we're going to burn something down. And what happens in my community when you burn something down, the next thing they do, they bring a bulldozer in, they clean it up, and so my insurance company pays off and they build something right back. And that's the reality of it. and to get mad and to get upset because we can't do whatever big department does, I think is foolish.
I think we're in a renaissance age when it comes to training, though. The amount of information we have right now is phenomenal. The amount of good instructors out there is phenomenal. So when you see somebody looking at the I want to do like XYZ, there's somebody out there preaching the message that works for them. It might take a little digging, but it's out there. And like in my state, you go to the fire academy, and I've been a fire academy instructor for 20 some odd years. We do a live burn. Invariably, we put 4 people on a hose line. And I'm like, nobody is leaving this class and going home with 4 people to advance the line. Why are we doing this? We're setting them up for failure. We're giving them a false sense of how this goes. This needs to be a 2-person stretch because that's what they're going to do at home. And then, well, they may get tired. Okay. You're going to get tired. We got to realize that. Maybe we don't do a 150-foot stretch to the building. We find a closer door, right? We have to look for ways to adapt that over. But if you're a training officer, you're a company officer, you're somebody that can influence things, somebody out there is doing something with the resources that you have. And I heard somebody say in a presentation one time in this state that you provide the level of fire service your citizens are willing to pay for. And I really don't agree with that statement as much because it's not the citizens making decisions. And that's probably been 15 years, and it still makes me mad when I hear that statement. But you have to provide the level of service that you're capable of doing. And you can be aggressive, but it's calculated aggressiveness. It's calculated risk, right? Find ways to write a playbook for your department that match the team that you show up on the field with. And if it means getting along better with your neighbors, utilizing mutual aid, automatic aid, whatever better to make your playbook work, that's your answer. And you go do your drills, whether you're career volunteer or do your drills to your playbook, and you're going to see some smoothness occur there because it's like practicing football, you're running plays.
Jonathan and I can have these debates about numbers, but I don't remember who I was talking to this earlier. We've roughly got 17,000 members of our organization. I think your portal has got, was it 22, 23?
No, it's about 18.
Okay. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 17, 18,000 individuals in this state that are in this occupation at some level or some degree. And that really, from our numbers, hadn't changed a whole lot in the past decade. But we know that there's this reduction in volunteers. So maybe there's a converse increase in paid people, but the total numbers really aren't changing. It's not like we're growing firefighters on trees and picking them off and putting them extra people on rigs. It ain't happening. And yet demand for services has increased. The volatility of the fire environment is rapidly changed and increased because of what construction and what contents. And we hadn't changed what we're doing. Our philosophy is still the same. And I think there's the culture change that it's not about what we were doing is bad. It's not what kind of helmets we got are bad. We can have that fight in a little bit. But I mean, it's about, right? But it's about the culture of just the intelligence and the justification and the ramifications of what we're doing.
Amen.
I'll sell that one then, didn't I?
No, it is. And it goes back to, you were talking about the educated firefighter. I'll go back to former state fire marshal Shane Ray, the thinking firefighters. And it's just a matter of you do this in everyday life. You see the problem in front of you. You evaluate the problem you have against the resources that you can bring to bear against that problem. And you have to adapt the way you handle the problem to the resources that you brought to bear. I ain't that smart. I mean,
That's the real reality of it all. And I think that, as we talk about this, it gets to be a touchy subject because, believe me, I in this industry, I've taught a lot of classes, and I kind of use photos that I get, and bumper stickers that are out there, and other stuff that.
Get me started. Right.
Yeah, exactly. But I always say you don't want to end up on my slide deck, But I go back to Prince George's County. When I was there, I had a department on the front of their ladder truck that said "having fun at other people's expense." Bumper sticker right on the front of the truck. We had some discussions about that. Eventually, it disappeared. But I understand this. We want to be like New York, and you're talking about the numbers and aggressive and all that other stuff. And yes, you need to be able to do the job. You need to be able to advance the hose line, do the searches. There's a lot of discussion about Baltimore and this row house. 3 dead firefighters. Nobody was in it. It was a homeless place. Um, and you sit back and I'm going to put this in perspective of real life. The one part of my job that I am not going to miss is that I have to read every single fatality study or report that's done. Last year, I did 143 of them and make a determination whether it fits the criteria as a line of duty death. 143 reports of firefighter fatalities. And I can tell you that bulk of them, you could take the department's name out, the firefighter's name and sex out, and they read exactly the same, what they did or didn't do. And that's the piece that drives me somewhat crazy to say that we've got to change how we do business. It's frustrating because we continue to do the same things. Go back to Ben Franklin, do the same thing and think you're gonna have a different result. Well, that's the definition of insanity.
Well, Ron, you did say earlier that traditional line of duty deaths have declined in your time, 25%, right?
Yeah.
But we see more cardiac events. We see more cancer now, things like that. So in changing that culture, though, we have to embrace fitness. We have to embrace living cancer reduction, right? So that culture change is much bigger in that. And everybody wants to focus on, we can't be the aggressive firefighter. We can't do this. But the bigger picture is we have to take this as a global approach to our lives.
And believe me, I'm not saying you can't be. I did, many years on a hose line in Prince George's, and we were aggressive. But you were also trying to be smart enough to know when and when not to do certain things.
Well, and that's what I like about a lot of the hands-on classes. A lot of the stuff y'all did in the officer academy is it's teaching aggressiveness, but it's also teaching efficiency, stretching lines. The reality is you probably don't have 4 guys or gals on the line. So how do you stretch it efficiently so you can stretch it with the resources that you're bringing? That's what I like about a lot of the hands-on training we've seen lately in our state and been incorporating those kinds of programs. It's not throwing false reality at the training, right? Your reality is your reality. You may not like it, but it is your reality. And so you've got to train to what your local reality is. And a lot of times that means the public expects you when you roll up to do something. And sometimes that means we've got to learn efficiencies because we're showing up with what we show up with.
Train to give them the fire crew that you want pulling up for your family. And that's an ethos of training right there.
All right, we're running out of time. So here's lightning round. Are you ready for lightning round? Dun, dun, dun.
We have buzzers?
Yes,
Stretch.
yes, you do. Well, the Jeopardy theme will play in the background. We'll give you a second to think about it. All right, lightning round question number 1. In the next 6 months, next year, something immediate. Define the term as you will. 12 months, 14 months, I don't care. It may be shorter for some than others. What's the big ticket coming for you? What do you see as your big hurdle, something big you're working on? What's the next big thing that you personally are tackling? Maybe that's something you're doing, something you're reading, something you're training on, something you're looking for, something you're trying to pass off to succession or what have you. What's coming for you that we as an audience can sit back and watch leaders and say, hey, look what this guy or person is doing.
Well, Ron's the short timer.
Well,
That's
That was
why
good.
that's why you got good AV
He's
people.
quick.
That's why you got good AV people.
on a personal note, retiring from the foundation and ensuring that Victor, who's my replacement, has all the tools and the support he needs to keep the organization going and successful. On a national perspective, I think the element that's going to have the most attention and need to be addressed correctly is firefighter suicides. That goes into the prevention of it. That there's a huge discussion, and there was disagreements among the fire industry that just declaring it a line of duty and getting the family the benefit, that's important. But boy, if we could take those dollars and put into preventing it, prevent the suicide before it happens, then I think we're doing a better service and justice towards the family and the departments in the communities.
In Georgia, we're working on a PTSD legislation right now to try to curb some of the things. It'd be an insurance policy. We're in a debate now that they're saying that if you have one occurrence of PTSD, that's all you get for your life. You have it for one occurrence. So we're fighting that language. But on a fire service level, I'm on a technical panel for UL. We're looking at exposure to live fire instructors, how to protect live fire instructors. We're getting more of an exposure doing that than the student would, and even a lot of firefighters. And in that, there's some neat things in there. The best way to stack pallets to get good fire growth and what kind of burn buildings work best, which are kind of some ancillary things in the study. And that should be done later this year. And that's pretty cool. And I can't wait to see the results on that.
Wow, y'all's is way more exciting than mine. Yeah, I lots of things. I mean, again, we do our best at State Fire to be what our mission says we are, and that's the state's focal point to serve and support you to save lives and property. So it's always a challenge. As we were just in a meeting with training officers, is to be able to provide you what you need to do, what you need to do. And our challenge is just the same thing we were just talking about, is having the resources to meet the demand. And so being creative in some of the ways that we're doing that, I think expanding some of the different delivery methods that are probably underutilized through the Fire Academy. I'm really excited about, thanks to an infusion of funding through support the legislature and the fire service that helped get us that is the growth of our emergency response task force programs. They're being utilized more in state and out of state, more than they ever have. I'm excited about South Carolina's community risk reduction program, Fire Safe South Carolina, and it teeters between us and the state of New York in terms of the number of smoke alarms installed by fire departments and the number of confirmed lives saved through smoke alarms installed by fire departments. And it's constantly teetering, I think, between us and New York for leading that. And so I'm just excited about those things. But I think the thing that's got me most excited right now is we're really focusing on, and I think that is my job, is to focus on our team, because our team is what makes that happen. And so we have just started State Fire University, which is similar to the Leadership Institute. It's a year-long program for our employees, our team members, to help build their knowledge of how state fire works. Y'all, I had to learn it the hard way, and to be able to pass that on and build longevity and capacity and infuse innovation into a lot of the discussions and the ideas. And I'm really excited. It's just kicked off, but I'm really, really excited about what I think that's going to do for our team.
Jonathan Jones, State Fire Marshal, thank you for what you do. You got a great team. You're doing a great job. We appreciate you committing to working about 7 more years. Thank you for doing that. We appreciate it. I know that Benita over here said the same thing. She just went, yay. Thank you, sir, for all you do. David Bullard, thank you, sir. Congratulations on the honorary membership. We expect you to be here at everything now and working. Heck, you already are. Never mind. You're already doing that. Thank you for being up here on the stage with us, sir, and our best wishes to you, and look forward to seeing you around. He's taking pictures, so if you want your picture taken, smile at him. Ron Sarnicki, my friend. Sir, what a great career you've had. We are in admiration of everything you've done. We can't tell you thank you enough for coming down here and hanging out with us a couple of days. Maryland program's kicking off today or yesterday. All right. So he's giving up hometown time to be down here with us.
Convention chair.
Right. And so he's the chair of the convention. So thank you for giving up that time, and God bless you for being down here. And thank you, sir. You're always welcome. All of your family, he's kind of known that, but you two are family now. So just come back anytime. Thank y'all for sitting here and listening to us. At 5:30, we're going to have an opening of the exhibit hall. And if you're one of the first 500 in line, you get a ball cap. So I would suggest you might want to go that way. Thank you for your patience and sitting here and talking with us today. Thanks.
Hey, Joe, can Ron give us one gorilla thump?
One gorilla thing? Never mind. Thank you.
I love problem.